And joining us now, guitar maker extraordinaire, Linda Manzer. It's so good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Steve.
Surrounded by her product.
That's true. I wouldn't call them products.
No kidding. I'd call them works of art, but we're going to get to that. Linda, what do you call somebody who makes guitars?
A luthier.
A luthier?
Derived from the word lute, and I'm a stringed instrument maker.
Not a guitar maker?
Well, I tell most people I'm a guitar maker, because if I tell them I'm a luthier, they think it's some kind of religion.
From Martin Luther's?
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. How'd you get into this?
I watched Joni Mitchell performing at Toronto Island, and she's playing a dulcimer. I went to buy one, and they were way too expensive for me at the time. I was a teenager. So the fellow at the shop encouraged me to buy a kit. So after a long discussion about it, I finally bought the kit, made my first musical instrument, and the bug bit. The rest is history.
Fantastic. And how many years ago was that?
It's about 40 years ago.
Is that right?
Yes.
Huh. Is a good guitar maker necessarily a good guitar player?
No, and I'm a prime example.
You don't play well, you don't think? I mean, are you being modest here?
No, I used to play better, but they're two different disciplines, and you have to apply yourself to be a good guitar player as you do to be a good guitar maker.
Huh.
So.
Now, I'm told you are, this sounds trite and I don't mean it to, but you're like the guitar maker to the stars in some respects, right? Some of the best come to you when they want a new guitar. For example, who have you made for?
Bruce Cockburn, Pat Metheny, Carlos Santana, Leona Boyd, Milton Nascimento from Brazil, if I forget somebody, Roy Patterson, Julian Lodge,
Gordon Lightfoot?
Gordon Lightfoot.
Don't want to forget him. He lives right near here.
No, yeah, he does.
Well,
that's true.
Rosedale, not too far away. Who would you like to make a guitar for that you have not yet made a guitar for?
That's a trick question. I always wanted to make one for Joni Mitchell, because that's where I got the bug, bit because of watching her perform. But that hasn't happened. So, but I'm happy to make guitars for whoever makes incredible music or just loves making music. So,
one of the names on that list was Pat Metheny, and I want to read a quote of his about what you do. Pat said, "Linda Manzer made me a 6-string. It was the instrument I used to record Lonely Woman on Rejoicing. That tune just sparkles because of that guitar. She made me that one guitar, which I immediately fell in love with, and then I said, well, how about you make me a 12-string? The night I got it, I wrote 4 tunes. It was a totally inspiring instrument." I think Pat is suggesting that in some respects, the instrument, maybe it's too strong to say, can make the musician, but can really inspire the musician to do something he or she might not ordinarily do. Do you know what that is?
I think it's like it's like a painter having different colors of paint to work with. It's a tool primarily, and what my job is to inspire the musician to want to play it and explore it. And if, some people pick up a guitar and they just feel completely comfortable with it, and that's the guitar for them. If not everybody feels that same way about every guitar, so they all have a different effect, which is why I've made Pat so many instruments, because each one takes him in a different musical direction.
How many have you made for him?
Over 20.
Is that right?
I've actually lost track. So I haven't.
And what is it about the characteristics of each of those guitars that you think speaks to him particularly?
I think, that's an interesting question. I think my guitars have kind of a dark piano-like sound. I think they're kind of deep and rich, and his fingers bring out a particular type of sound that matches what he wants to hear, I think. So I think my guitars help him translate what he's thinking into a sound.
Would a French horn maker have the same kind of relationship with a French horn player, or a trumpet maker with a trumpet player?
I don't know. That's a question I don't know.
These instruments seem, no disrespect to people who make brass instruments, but these really look like works of art, like creations, in a way that other instruments maybe don't. Now that's maybe, I don't know if I'm reflecting a bias that you may have as well on this, but does that make any sense to you?
Well, I do have a bias, because I love making them, and each one is a journey and an exploration for me, and they're challenging to make. I mean, but when you see them all done, you kind of go, there they are, but there's actually hundreds of little steps between raw wood to the finished product, the finished guitar. Now you've got me talking about products.
You called them units earlier.
I did, but it's a little joke. But
okay. Well, how long does it take to make a guitar?
Well, I've made this particular guitar. There's 30 in this particular series, so which I usually make one-offs, but This was a challenge for me to make 30 identical guitars, and I've been doing this for 3 years. I'm just about finished, and I'm on my 3rd year. So that's about 10 a year.
10 guitars a year.
Yeah.
You can make 10 guitars a year.
I used to, when I was younger and friskier, I made 24 in 1 year. That was my maximum, but I don't think I could do that anymore.
Wow. Now, the obvious thing I notice about this one that's different from most others, in fact, why don't you pick it up, because I am going to ask you to play it. Not only does it look beautiful, but I presume it sounds beautiful too.
Well, it sounds better when other people play it, but...
Oh, that's very sweet.
Thank you.
Now, just hold it for a second there and tell us, I mean, first thing that screams at you is you've got some kind of hieroglyphics or something along the, what do you call that?
The fingerboard.
The fingerboard.
Yeah, this is, what I call the Metheny Manzer. There's 30 of these, and I made these as kind of a celebration of my relationship with Pat. So I've made 30. He designed the inlays. I put them into a form on the fingerboard, but there's over 200 pieces of black Tahitian pearl on here that sort of, I don't know if your camera can pick it up, but they sort of disappear and come into light. So it's kind of like an animation working its way down the fingerboard.
And what are they supposed to represent?
They're his doodles. And I guess because he's traveled all over the world, they're kind of an Esperanto of language. I don't know really. It's just something I noticed he was doing. And I asked him if I thought it would be appropriate to put it on this particular guitar.
I'm going to move closer here because I just can't reach, but I think most guitars have something here, and you've got it cut away here. Why did you do that?
That's so you have more accessibility to the upper frets. So if you're playing, you can get right up here. You can get right up to the top. And the other thing Pat does is, for guitar players watching, he plays with his thumb. So when you get here, this is a thumb rest, so you kind of have a soft landing when you get up there instead of hitting and it's also got a wedge, which means it's skinnier under your arm, fatter there.
Oh, I see, okay.
And it's got...
Look how gorgeous that is. What kind of wood is that?
That's Indian rosewood for the back and sides, and the top is a German spruce.
And you've got something...
This?
This thing here, what is this?
Oh, that's an abalone rosette. There's about 17 pieces of wood in here that are forced into I route out a slot and I put them in. It's all totally handmade. It's a lot of work.
Gorgeous.
Thank you.
Let me ask you to put that one back, Linda,
Okay.
and pick up the 2 blocks here.
All
Because
right.
I guess you probably, I mean, one of the reasons you brought these is to demonstrate how the same piece of wood can make a different sound.
Yeah.
So
So
go
I have
ahead.
2 pieces of wood here that were actually identical in sound. So what I did was, this is just so you understand how people tune guitar tops. What you do is you shave wood off or you add struts to add mass. So this piece sounds like that.
Okay.
And then same piece, but you take out that little piece. So you just made it thinner.
Huh.
Significant difference.
Yes.
So that's kind of gives you the basic principle of how you tune wood.
There is, let me get you to say a little piece on each guitar here. The one you just picked up was the Metheny Manzer.
Yes?
The one over there you call the Panther?
The Panther.
What's the story behind that one?
That one was one I just kind of threw into the mix in the last 6 months. I had a customer in mind I was thinking of who I actually approached him and said, I just made this and I thought you might be interested in it. And he bought it. So I was thinking of him as I was building it.
Gorgeous.
So,
And this one beside me is called?
The Jazz Cat. And that is one of the original guitars I made that actually the fellow who bought this one really wanted that one, and I did not want to sell it at all because I wanted to keep it. But I realized guitars are supposed to be played. I'm not supposed to hold on to them and just save them because I don't play that much myself. So I decided it was more important to put it into the hands of somebody who's going to play it. And I sort of feel like guitars end up being with who they're supposed to be with. So they may pass through a few hands and then they end up being loved in the hands of the person who's going to really play them.
Okay. This next piece that we're going to show is unlike anything I've ever seen before. You call it the Picasso. Michael, if we can, let's just take a look at that guitar, which I don't... Linda, I mean, you know, were you on LSD when you designed that, or what's...
It's for the whole family. Everyone can play that
How
one.
many strings on that?
That looks great on TV, by the way.
Doesn't it?
That's got 42 strings.
And three different necks.
Three necks. I made that in 1984 for Pat Metheny. He asked me for a guitar with as many strings as possible. It's got 2 doors, so you can get in, 2 sound holes. It's got the first wedge that I ever did, which was actually, I invented the wedge for that particular guitar. And it's, he plays it on all over the world. And usually when he walks on stage with it, you know, the audience goes.
It gets a reaction.
It does.
But truthfully, that is such a revolutionary design. Where would the notion of even putting extra necks on and all of that come from?
I don't know. I just rose to the challenge of as many strings as possible. It had quite a transition. It looked quite different on paper before it got to that. But it took about 9 months to build that. 5 months of solid, insane working. And by the time it was done, I was actually quite used to how weird it was. So when I showed it to the first group of people and they freaked out, I realized this was probably going to mark my career for the rest of my life.
How many have you made of those?
2.
So Pat's got one.
And I sold one to a collector called Scott Chinnery, who passed away, and now another collector bought that. So that's kind of more of a museum piece.
How do you even play that thing?
You can play it. You just have to think really carefully. You know, it's probably like driving a standard when you've been used to driving an automatic. A standard with 4 steering wheels. I don't know.
Okay, here's the next thing. How much do you charge somebody for a guitar like that?
Like that one? Well, if I was to make another one, I would charge over $100,000. Let's just say that.
How do you even know how to price something like that?
It's hard because it's never as simple as you think it's going to be. Even though I've made 2, I know that there's all sorts of things that happen. And I mean, just getting wood that's big enough to make one of those that's of good quality is difficult nowadays.
And these ones here in the studio, how much would they go for?
They would all start, this is really embarrassing, about $30,000 start up and up. My guitar base price is about 18 grand.
So not exactly Long and McQuaid?
No.
Nothing against Long and McQuaid.
No, that's okay. There's
I've left
guitars.
some money there myself on too many occasions. But
Yeah.
anyway, no, but,
well,
you know.
they're reflective of the amount of time and energy that goes into them, and I think as a person building them, I know how much time goes into them, so I know they're worth it.
As you sit down to build a guitar, do you also think to yourself, I'm not just making an instrument, I am creating a work of art?
I've thought that more in the latter part of my career because they've been looked at that way. I was never used to it. They've been in the Smithsonian Museum of Fine Art in Boston. There's one in the collection in Ottawa. Because other people have looked at it that way, I've sort of been forced to look at it that way. But originally, when I started making them, they were tools. They're just, all I wanted to do is get something that felt great, that inspired somebody to play and sounded as good as I could make it sound.
And do you feel now as if you have to, you know, rise to the challenge, even make them even more exotic or more beautiful or more of everything?
I kind of like doing that. So
yeah,
I like a challenge, and I like building. They're fun to build. I mean, I'm so used. I built probably about 500 guitars, so I like going somewhere I haven't been. And obviously, the Picasso was one like that. And I'm working on another thing. My brain is moving in the direction of some other weird. That'll come up in the next year or so.
Now, you call it the Picasso, but you spell it with a K, not a C.
I didn't want to get sued.
Oh, is that why? Is that why?
Yeah.
Okay.
Think that's a good idea?
So Picasso because it's a work of art.
I called it, it named itself. What happened is so many people kept saying it looks like what Picasso would have done.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of named itself.
Brilliant.
And I just put the K in, just to be safe.
Gotcha. I'm also going to assume that there are numerous luthiers in this world, but probably precious few women who do it. Is that true?
That is completely true. There are that I know of, about 5 full-time guitar makers that are women, and most of them are in Canada, strangely.
Huh. Why do you think such a gender gap on that?
Because it's a man's world. It's woodworking. You have to go into lumber yards, hardware stores, and I think it's changed over the years. I think it's more acceptable, but when I started, it was very difficult. People wouldn't buy my guitars because I was a woman.
Come on.
I know they wouldn't. I got feedback that, sorry, they would have bought it, but they didn't want to buy it from a girl. So that was now 1974 we're talking about, but we've come a long way, baby.
Indeed. Well, since we're going to go back in time a little bit, let me take you, and actually, funnily enough, his 68th birthday was a week ago. Jimi Hendrix.
Yes.
You got a Jimi Hendrix story? Because I don't have to tell you, there's lots of people who think he's the greatest ever who ever picked up a guitar.
Yeah, well, he actually was in Toronto for a concert, and he got busted for heroin. So
Well, there's a shock. Anyway.
and he had to come back for the court case. So I was applying for a job, which I got as a telephone operator that day. I was dressed in my little orange suit, and I got his autograph, and he sort of completely ignored me. And then we went to Old City Hall, and I sat in the court house while he was getting, I guess he got off. And then I was going to a concert and I switched into my hippie clothes. And then when I came out, I met him again, and now I was more attractive. So I and his manager and 2 other people walked. I spent 20 minutes with him. We walked to the underground parking garage at Old City Hall, and I got to spend 20 minutes sort of one-on-one talking to Jimi
What'd you
Hendrix.
talk about?
I don't know. I mean, I was sort of blown away that I was even standing and walking along with him, but he was a really lovely, sweet man. He was very gentle, and he's very, very polite, and I remember thinking what a great guy, and being really sad when he died shortly after that.
At the age of 27.
Wow.
Can you imagine what he would have been able to accomplish?
Oh, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
You'd love to have made a guitar for him, I bet.
Yes, I would. I would.
What would you have made for him?
Oh, anything he wanted. I'm sure he could have handled anything. He was an electric guitar player, and I'm an acoustic player, builder, but anything he wanted.
Now he's a lefty, right? He plays backwards.
That's true.
So do you have to design it differently for a left-handed
You just
player?
have to put stickum notes all over it saying reverse the template, you know. So that's all you have to do.
Paul McCartney is the same way, right? He's
That's
a lefty
true.
as well.
He's a lefty. Yeah.
Huh. Stick 'em notes. I got to remember that. Linda, this is awfully good of you to come in tonight and share some of your creations and your views with us. It's just beautiful work, and we're so grateful you could spare the time.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Get back to it, because if you make 10 a year, I'm sure we're taking valuable time away from your pushing product out the door.
It's okay.
So,
The pleasure's mine.
great. Thank you so much.